In this video, we're going to multiply matrices together. Please have pen and paper handy as well as your graphics calculators so that you can write this down and do it along with me. So two matrices can only be multiplied together as long as their orders are compatible. And what we mean by compatible is that the number of columns of the first matrix here matches the rows of the second. So let's have a think about what orders that they've got. Example 1 here. Its order is a 3 by 3, 3 rows, 3 columns. What's the order of this one? Rows first. How many rows? 3 rows and then 1 column. And so these, what we call the middle numbers, if you like, need to match. And so the reason we can multiply them together is because when you write out the orders of the two matrices, so the one that's coming first, you name first, so A, that's a 3 by 3, multiplied by a 3 by 1. I always like to think of it that if these middle numbers match, it's a bit like one of those marble popping games when you get, 3 in a row and they hit each other and they disappear. That's essentially what happens. So these 3's disappear and the resulting matrix is these two numbers at the ends. And so the final matrix there will have an order of a 3 by 1, which will be 3 rows and 1 column. So it'll look like what we just had there for matrix B, one long column matrix. So getting into example 2 here, reminding us that the orders need to be compatible. So this first matrix, what's its order? Rows by columns. So that's a 3 by 1. And now if we look at matrix A, we're using the same ones we had before. How many rows, how many columns? A 3 by 3. Can these be multiplied together in this specific order? So in matrices, it does matter which one comes first. Just as a bit of a side note here, matrix multiplication is not commutative. I'll explain this here. So noticing that these middle numbers do not match, this 1 and this 3, they're not the same. So you cannot multiply B by A with B coming first. With normal numbers, things are commutative. I'll give you an example. The numbers 3 and 4. If 3 came first and then the 4, what do you get? 12. So 3 came first. What if you swap them around? What if you go 4 by 3 and the 4 comes first? What number do you get? 12. So with normal numbers, when you multiply them together or add, they're commutative, which means it doesn't matter which order. But with matrices, it really does. With the multiplication there, they're not commutative, as you see that you don't get the same. And sometimes you can't even do them. So in this case, because these numbers don't match, it won't work. If you were to put these into your graphics calculators and get it to try and do B multiplied by A, it will give you an error. So let's try multiplying these by hand. Bring your patience with this one because it just does take a little bit of thinking to see what matches where. So first of all, we need to check that the orders of the matrices are compatible. This first matrix here, how many rows? 3 rows. How many columns? 2. What about this second one? How many rows? 2. How many columns? 3. So what's the resulting matrix? If we have a 3 by 2 multiplied by a 2 by 3, these middle numbers match and disappear. So our final matrix will be a 3 by 3. So imagining what that's going to look like. All right, so first of all, we need to examine or have a look at the first row of matrix 1. So that's this row here is going to be multiplied by the first column. So we're going to multiply each element together, but add them as well. Let me walk you through that. So the first element of matrix 1 in the first row multiplied by the first element of matrix 2. Then we're going to add the next multiplication, which is this 4. So we're going across the row in matrix 1 and down the column in matrix 2. Across a row, down a column. And this is how we get this 4 times by 0. And that's all going into position 1 out of the 3 by 3. So we're going to keep going. We're going to keep using row 1 and use it in each of the columns. So we've done row 1 multiplied by column 1. Now we're going to do row 1 multiplied by column 2. So let's write that out. So here we are. The 2 in row 1 multiplied by the first element in the second column. 2 by 3. And then we're going to add the 4 multiplied by, so we've gone across the row, down the column, multiplied by that 2 and add. And then as you can imagine, there's one more element to go. We are going across the row. So this 2 multiplied by the 2 over here in the third column, add the 4 multiplied by the 1. So we've gone across the row, down the column, and multiplied them, but we're going to add them together. And now we're going to repeat that for rows 2 and 3. So we've moved down a row. So we're using this 3 and the 1 now, and multiplying it by each of the columns. And you can see what we get here. A 3 multiplied by 1, and then this 1 in the second row multiplied by the 0. So we've gone across the row, down a column. And then you keep using row 2 until you've used up all of the columns, and then you move to row 3. And then you need to work each of these out. So 2 multiplied by 1 is 2, plus 4 multiplied by 0, which is 0. So doing all of those multiplies and additions, here is the matrix that we come up with at the end. So that's a 3 by 3. As you can see, this is quite tedious to do these things by hand, and there's lots of tiny places that you could make mistakes. It is worth knowing how to do, so you need to make sure you've done some practice, but let's also use our graphics calculators. So I'm going to take you through that in a minute using an emulator, but just a refresher, what we're going to have to do. We need to store both of the matrices, so matrix A and matrix B. We need to enter them in with their elements, their rows and their columns. Then we need to go back to the run screen and get it to recall matrix A. We're going to use the multiply key, then we're going to type in matrix B, hit execute, and hopefully get this matrix here, this 3 by 3. So have your graphics calculators, and I'll bring mine up on the screen. We're using the emulator here. As you can see, I have the keystrokes written down in this section. I've got the calculator there on the left, and then on the right at the bottom, I've got the 2 matrices that we need to enter into and the final result that we need to get. So we're using menu 1. You can arrow across and hit execute, or you can just hit 1 for menu 1. As the keystrokes have written down here, F3 to go into the matrix menu. So to enter matrix A, what's its order? How many rows? It's 3. How many columns? 2. So I'm just going to start typing the number 3, and that brings that up. Enter, 2, execute, execute again, and now that takes you to the screen where you enter the numbers. You enter them by going across the rows, and it will take you down the columns. So I'm going to enter 2, then 4, 2, execute, 4, execute, then 3, 1, 0, and 5. Please, you be doing this as well. You'll get much more out of this if you do. Then you want to exit out of that and enter matrix B. So arrow down 1, type in the order. What is its order? How many rows? 2 rows. How many columns? 3. Entering that, and it will take us to the input menu. So we're going 1, 3, 2 across the first row, and then 0, 2, 1 across the second row. This is sometimes where we make mistakes, so really take care to enter these incorrectly at this point. Exit, and now we want to exit again back to this run or matrix menu. We need to ask our calculator to take matrix A and multiply it by matrix B. So we need to put the word mat for matrix in there. We're going to use the shift button and then use the number 2, which as you can see has the word mat written there just above it. And then we need the alpha A to get the capital A. So the red alpha button, and then the button just below that, the X theta T button. So we've got mat A there, matrix A. We want it to multiply, so we just use the normal multiply symbol. And now you want it to put matrix B. So the shift button again, and the number 2 for the mat, or the matrix, alpha for the capital letter B, which is the log button. And then you're going to want to execute and enter that. And here's what we get. Does it match what's down in the bottom corner here? Yes, it does. And so definitely in a test, it's great to do a matrix multiplication by hand and then check it with your calculator to make sure that you can see if you've got any errors or not. These are some of the questions to do now. As you notice, some are by hand and some are using the graphics calculator, but obviously check with your teacher which ones they'd like you to do. Thanks for joining me.